What's up, slashes and slashettes? My name's Nightfall, and welcome back to another anime analysis video. Today, we will be discussing the Isekai that just recently started its second season, the Faraway Paladin. To begin with, let's start with the major plot points, and then in the next segment, I'll go over why I think it's one of the greatest Isekai. So Will is raised by three undead: a ghost wizard Gus, a skeleton knight, no, not that one, named Blood, and a mummy priestess named Mary. Will used to live in our world, and the way he died is a mystery, but we do know it was supposedly a waste, and after being reborn and realizing that he wasn't in hell, he took it as a sign to live in this world and not waste his life again. We also find out when he interrupts Mary's prayer that he had apparently lost his family in his previous life as well. After a good scolding and some time passing, Blood gives him a demon blade capable of killing a god's echo, and shortly after, we find out all three of them made a deal with the god of undeath, Stagnate, and as such are branded traitors of the virtuous gods, hence why Mary bursts into flames when praying to Mater. The ruined city where dwarves and humans used to live, and where a good chunk of the season takes place, is now left in ruins and the home to massive amounts of undead. When he explored these ruins, he runs into Gus, who tries to kill him. We'll go more into depth about this encounter in the next segment. Shortly after, Will and Blood fight, but Gus wants Will to pretend to lose, to which he refuses to do so. Afterwards, Will has to pledge an oath to a god, and we learn the history of Gus, Blood, Mary, and the ruined continent. The High King of the Eternals led demonic armies that caused destruction and mayhem and enabled other evil gods such as Stagnate to move and send his own minions to Earth. This battle between good and evil changed the very shape of the continent and possibly the world itself. The ruined city gave access to all the other settlements, so the High King settled there and mass-produced demons to overtake the surrounding places. Gus did lead a resistance, however, this led to the death of everyone involved, and while that was happening, though, Mary and Gus did manage to seal the High King when it became evident they would lose. This led to an echo of Stagnate descending onto them, and offering them a deal to become undead so they could watch over the seal. In exchange, he would get rid of every demon invading the city. The reason for this is because he can't stand to watch the tragedies of life and death, and wishes to create a stagnant world with neither, by turning the strong into the undead. They accepted the deal, binding them to the city and preventing them from being able to learn anything about the world outside. After telling Will, Blood and Mary say their goodbyes, as an echo of Stagnate descends. Gus defeats the echo rather quickly, or so he thought. Stagnate appears once more, as he had divided his strength into two bodies before descending, and destroys the bodies of all three: Gus, Mary, and Blood. Stagnate then tells Will about the deal they had with him, how they could serve him as the highest ranked undead as long as their attachment to the High King remained intact. However, due to raising Will, their attachment weakened, and, in the case of Mary's and Blood's, been severed altogether. Stagnate offers Will a deal to join his army, and in return, he could stay with his new family. And, well, then he just bounces. This causes Will to believe his life in this world would be a waste, and that his rebirth ruined everything. And once again, his family will die because of him. He talks to the three of them about his rebirth and how he feels so useless for making them suffer, to which Mary slaps his bitch ass and gets him back on his feet, both literally and figuratively. Will asks the gods for protection and fights Stagnate. After seeing Will's skill, Stagnate once again offers Will a place among his ranks and tells him how his ultimate goal is to create a kind world by ridding it of the harsh reality and pain of death. He tells Will to drink his blood and accept his offer. Will uses that as an opportunity to get close to Stagnate and cuts off his hand. He tries to slice Stagnate again, but Stagnate has a snake coil around Will's leg and bite him, killing and causing him to once again meet the goddess of light and rebirth, Gracefield, who he met when he first died. When she asks why he rejected Stagnate, he once again says how he wasted his last life, and by doing so, while he wasn't dead and didn't fear death, he wasn't alive either. By being reborn in this world with those memories, he found the value of life, and said that by choosing to live forever, it would end up the same as his previous life. He wouldn't care or have the motive to do anything. He'd once again be trapped. Gracefield then asks Will if he understands the value of life, yet is still willing to accept death. When he says yes, she holds out her hand and tells him to never forget his resolve and wake up and make his oath to her. When he wakes up, he makes a short prayer, to which Stagnate laughs and doesn't expect much except for the fact that, you know all that bread Mary prayed for and asked Will to eat every day? Yeah, it turns out those were all Holy Communions, and because of that, Stagnate's blood didn't affect Will at all. He literally overpowered a god by eating bread. He then makes his oath to Gracefield and gains her protection. After wiping out Stagnate's minions, Stagnate flees to the temple where Gus, Blood, and Mary are resting. As Will rushes to the temple, he figures out what Stagnate had planned and why he chose to go after Mary and them first. As he arrives, he knows he won't make it in time, but Mater protects them. Showing Mary her constant worship and devotion didn't go unnoticed, and that she was forgiven all along. Given that moment of opportunity, Will lures Stagnate into preventing Blood and Mary from being returned to the cycle of rebirth, and coordinates a 3-on-1 team-up attack with himself, Blood, and Gus, allowing him to finally stab through Stagnate's Echo and continuously slice him until he finally defeats his Echo. The four of them try to celebrate, and they do share one final drink. However, Mary and Blood, due to going back on their deal with Stagnate, are guided back into the cycle of rebirth. Gus stays as he accepted a deal from Gracefield to remain for 10 more years, a deal the other two declined. He gives Will some money and treasure and tells him how Gracefield's future depends on Will, as worship of her is no longer as frequent as it used to be, and so her power has declined significantly. With that, Gus sees Will, now William G. Maryblood, off as he starts on his journey. After spending time surviving and helping souls pass on for a long time by himself, he finally runs into another living person, a half-elf named Middledore, who, after sharing a meal, gives him directions and tells him to fuck off. However, as Will is sleeping, Gracefield gives him a divine revelation that shows Minnow and a village in danger, so Will rushes off after him. As he arrives, it's revealed that Minnow is the one who is attacking the village. After knocking him and his allies unconscious, Will learns that they live in a village nearby and that they always got along, leading to a mystery as to why they attacked. After being questioned, Minnow reveals their village was destroyed by demons. As the villagers are deciding whether or not to execute Minnow and the others, Will saves them by deciding to pay for them and goes to kill the demons. As they arrive to some ruins, demons are performing a ritual, and Will makes short work of them as well as the Manicore. When Minnow asks about his abnormal strength and skill, Will simply says he eats a lot of bread. As they get to the village, the villagers had turned undead. Will puts them to rest, and as we meet the last undead villager, Marple, what the fuck kind of name is that? We learn a bit about Minnow, and she tells Will about the demon's boss, who's settled in the forest. After a short celebration, Will talks to Minnow about his past in Marple, leading to Minnow being depressed and wanting to die, but also Will blessing Minnow. Minnow gives Will a brief lesson in world history, adding on to the world building of the show, and they help a village get back on their feet. They run into Rabina, a halfling bard, and Antonio, a peddler, who were being chased by a giant ape, which Will beats in a staring contest. What? We learn Tonio is from White Sails, which is where Will is trying to go, and we find out that this man keeps monsters away with nothing more than his sheer presence alone. Must be all that bread he ate. They head to a village, and Will shows how, through the blessing of Gracefield, he is capable of healing wounds by, as he so casually puts it, rewriting reality through the power of a god. As they settle for the night, B sings a song of the three heroes who killed the High King, showing to Will that Gus, Mary, and Blood are still remembered, and their deeds haven't been forgotten, as it tells the story of when they defeated a wyvern and saved a village. After Tonio and Will become official friends, they head off for White Sails. As they arrive, Will learns that the economy is great, and the ruler's top priority. While there, they head to a temple so Will can pay his respects. Due to the worship of Gracefield being so uncommon, he has to undergo a faith inspection. However, everyone is out at the moment, despite the Bishop Bagley, who, after questioning Will about his faith, demands he be put in the registry and shown throughout the temple. Just as Will and the gang rest for a bit in the temple guest rooms, a wyvern attacks the city. Will and Minnow use multitudes of magic to try and bring it down, but once that fails, Will rushes it and manages to stab it. However, that's not enough to bring it down, so in a last-ditch effort, Will jumps and grabs the wyvern's neck, bringing it to the ground, and, after struggling a bit, finally managed to snap its neck. That bread is doing a lot of work. After slaying the wyvern, Will is invited to the prince's mansion so he can offer thanks, And after a bunch of back and forth negotiations on what Will would accept as a reward, the meeting is interrupted by Bishop Bagley, who is furious the prince undermined the authority of the temple. However, the prince states that due to Will's conviction, he was debating on making him an official knight, and should the bishop give his okay, then he'd be made into a paladin. On the way back to the temple, we learn Bishop Bagley, while he may seem a bit extreme and strict, actually seems to be a good man, and tells him to remain in the chapel after the evening prayer. We get to see more about how Bishop Bagley isn't exactly a strict jerk, but instead a very devoted man, doing what he must to help his god's image and teach newer priests to do the same so they won't lose their blessings. After suggesting to Will to not become a paladin, Will refuses and wishes to go on with becoming one. Afterwards, he hires Rastov and a band of adventurers to help take out the demons in Beast Woods. He then gets knighted, which, shocker, makes him the Faraway Paladin. Oh yeah, baby. With that, they head back to Beast Woods. Everything seemed to be getting better and going smoothly until a party of expert hunters don't come back. So Will, Menel, and Rastov go out and search for them. This leads to them finding their dead bodies and tracks of a large creature. They get caught in a trap and are surrounded. During this, a chimera attacks and injures Metal. This sends Will into a rage, causing him to give up on his tactics and techniques and use Overeater as he takes a bite after bite and heals himself, killing every demon beast and rushing to heal Menel. Will passes out and wakes up in a village where Rastov carried both of them. Will reflects on the battle and where he could have improved and where exactly he failed. He decides it's because he failed to acknowledge his own strength due to not wanting to be alone, and as such, he viewed others as equal to his strength. With that realization, he views himself as a monster, and he heads off to kill the demon beasts by himself. However, Menel blocks his path, and the two end up fighting. Menel gives Will a good wake-up call and helps him get into a better headspace. With that, they head back to the village to recoup and gather a force to fight the Chimera and demons again. Will and Menel take on the Chimera, where Will proves his battle smarts by attacking the three heads separately in order to disorient the Chimera, instead of trying to take it down in one strike. After defeating the Chimera, they go further and find that Rastov already killed the demon boss while they were handling the Chimera. After that, they head back to their village now that the demon threat is taken care of. It's here that Menel tells Will that he is effectively the lord of the villages, something Will hadn't even realized. And I'm sorry that was so long and so much info, but I felt like all of what we discussed was very important, so I do apologize. But with that out of the way, let's discuss why this is one of the greatest isekai. One thing this anime does really well is developing the relationships between Will and other characters, and also simply developing Will as his own character. Gus is a grandpa who teaches magic and academics. Mary is a mom who teaches useful miscellaneous knowledge like gardening and things like that, while also offering protection. And Blood is a father who teaches Will how to fight and defend himself. These familial bonds are further supported by how much the three of them care for Will. Both Mary and Blood blame themselves for Will being burned, and despite Blood getting stern and setting a rule to always talk to them before doing anything, you can tell that he isn't necessarily mad at Will. He was upset that Will went against a rule they had and didn't wait for him to explain the situation, but he was more concerned for Will's safety and even admired his bravery. Overall, they're very mature in their interactions and the way they handle situations. To go over Will as a character, Will is not an idiot. When fighting Gus, he goes over all the ways Gus could have killed him if he was actually wanting to, and trusted Gus enough to figure out that he was in a situation where he had to kill Will, and can tell Gus was lying and trying to pass it off as a lesson. Which goes back to my previous point about how much they care about Will. Even with everything that was at stake, Gus couldn't bring himself to kill Will, and tried to lie for Will's mental well-being. You also see more light-hearted bonding between the three of them, such as when they teach Will gambling and then are reprimanded by Mary, Mary giving him a haircut and complimenting his looks, Blood getting drunk with Will and getting into shenanigans, Blood's constant teasing, and him and Mary's banter after their fight. I mean, the very reason Stagnate even entered back into the picture was because of how much they cared for Will. These bonds also lead into what I consider one of the greatest showcases of losing a loved one I've seen in anime. And these bonds between characters also continue to be a trend between Will and the other main characters later in the season. Menel is the man who finds the light through Will. and is his first friend and right-hand man, so to speak. B is the one who sings Will's praise, spreads his story, and offers him valuable information. Antonio is the man who provides for Will's endeavors and manages his finances so these endeavors can happen. And finally, Will, our protagonist, who was once a waste of life, but now, after being reincarnated, has found the value of life and a purpose to protect it. And these bonds between the characters makes this anime stick out as one of the greatest isekai of all time. This anime is a lot slower paced than other fantasies and isekai by focusing a lot on character relationships, world building, and exploration more so than action. And while yes, there is a good bit of action, it doesn't usually last an entire episode or longer, and is instead used as a tool to further the previous topics I mentioned. In a way, it makes the fighting more organic and helps to keep the story moving, and so far, it seems the second season is continuing with this trend, and I do recommend this isekai to anyone looking for a bit of a slower but still strong watch. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If it's your birthday, happy birthday, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Goodbye.